Welcome everyone. We have the 4:15 session, and we have these folks who are gonna go with the session on panel, curating a complete email experience for recipients. We have Molly from SendGrid, Lara from Quizlet, and Tony from Figma. So all you guys.
Awesome. So thank you guys for coming to this session. We're super excited to hear from Tony and Laura about how they have really curated complete email experiences for their recipients. To start off with, I'm Molly Frederick. I work for Twilio SendGrid in the product marketing group, and the best part of my job is getting to get to know customers, understand how they're using our tools, and also kind of mine for some insights around what interesting challenges we can help them solve. So it's how I got to know both Laura and Tony. Laura is the marketing director at Quizlet, and Tony heads up growth at Figma. And we're going to hear a little bit more about their companies in just a second, but suffice to say they're very different businesses, very different user bases, and yet for both of you guys, email is critical as a channel to make sure that you're achieving your goals and hitting your objectives. And they use both, are kind of all kinds of email that Twilio SendGrid supports. They're sending transactional and operational messages, one-time, one-to-many campaigns, as well as, more recently, automated recurring emails and drip series. So super excited to ask you guys some questions. I'm going to shift this chair a bit. And so to kind of start off and get some context, I was hoping that you could each describe or give us a little bit of background about your companies and who you serve. Do you want to start, Tony?
Sure.
Cool.
My name's Tony Jamael. I work on the growth team at Figma, where email is a big part of my responsibility there. For those of you guys who don't know what Figma is, it's a online design tool where designers, developers, project managers can design, collaborate, prototype, and comment all in one kind of online whiteboard style space.
Awesome.
And I work at Quizlet. We're the most popular online learning service in the US. We help 50 million students practice and master what they're learning and confidently prepare for their next test or assessment, whatever they're studying for. What else was I supposed to say besides where I work? That's it.
No,
Head of marketing there. Our team, I started there, I'll say 3 years ago as our first marketer, and we're now 8 people across a bunch of different marketing functions.
Very cool. So that's Quizlet and Figma. And then just to get to know you guys a little bit, I thought it'd be fun to know what was your first job out of college, and then what was the first job where you had responsibility for email as a channel? I'll start with you, Tony.
Yeah, so in college I was a sports writer, and I found out about this blogging platform called WordPress, and I got really into it. And so my first job was actually as a WordPress developer for a local agency in Tampa Bay called Big C. My first role kind of managing email was after college. I started a little startup called Banyan, which was kind of like GitHub for scientists to collaborate on research. And a big part of my community building strategy there was actually email lists, which were very popular in academia. And so that was kind of my gateway drug into email.
Nice. Awesome. How about for you?
My first job after college was at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. If any of you are Midwesterners, I was the communications coordinator there. And my first experience writing email was actually there. I started there as an intern, and I convinced them that we should have an e-newsletter because email was going to be the thing. And they were still operating in this very traditional print newsletter for their members space. So I actually do a lot of the same things that I do now in tech, which is research vendors and see what other people are doing and find the best practices and present it to the stakeholders. But it was just me as an intern. So that was kind of fun.
There you go. You've been doing this for a long time. So one of the goals today was to get super practical about your email strategies. So to start off with, just to kind of give us a lay of the land, what types of email are you sending to your prospects and users? Start with you.
Yeah, at Figma, I think we look at email kind of in 2 buckets. We have our go-to-market team. So that'll be things like single sends, marketing campaigns, sales events, and that's kind of one use case. The other use case would be more transactional style email. And one of the areas that we're exploring there is how to turn that into a lever for growth. How can we trigger emails on a semi-automated basis that deliver value to our users? And so that's kind of the 2 functions of email at Figma right now.
Awesome. How about for you, Laura?
Yeah, I would say our email sort of lives in 4 different streams, which seems like it's getting more complicated by the day. So there's marketing emails, which is just the traditional sort of batch and blast that we send out to millions of people at once. lifecycle emails, how do we move people down that sort of golden pathway and get them to the next thing that's going to allow them to have sort of an optimal experience on Quizlet. Transactional emails is your like typical like reset password, someone has shared content with you, et cetera. And then invitations, which is more like a growth channel for us, which is if you think Quizlet's an ed tech company, so you can imagine every student is in a class with like 29 other students who are probably studying the same thing. So it's very natural for like one student to create something and think like, oh, all the other kids in my AP history class also would use the same content, or we'll see teachers use that same sort of functionality to get the content they're sharing out. And that goes out through email, and that's sort of how it travels through ecosystems.
Awesome. I love that you're encouraging students to kind of help each other and share resources, which is obviously very similar to like the GitHub concept and things. So
yeah, we have a sort of a concept of like the Quizlet hero, who's like that. Maybe they're like the nerdy kid in your class, or maybe they're just like the kid who really, really loves Quizlet, and they're the person that everybody like looks to say like, did you create the study materials? Like, when are you going to share them out, et cetera? And that person oftentimes gets like a lot of cred.
Cool. So for each of you, if you could pick like one or two of those strategies that you're working on, and just kind of share for us the goals that you're driving towards, and then how do you actually know if you're being successful? Like, what are the metrics that you care about or look to?
Yeah, so for that first bucket for Figma, the go-to-market side, for things like product launches and our monthly newsletter, the thing I actually key on the most is unsubscribes, to really make sure that the go-to-market team is sending value and really keeping a high quality bar for the brand. And then in terms of actual click-through, what we look at internally is the click-to-open rate, so not just the open rate, not just the click-through rate. On the growth side and the transactional side, we're starting to push the envelope a little bit more about how we're segmenting those emails and certain things that we're trying to key on. A big part of Figma is the ability to share and collaborate with others. And so you get emails when you comment or other designers comment on your files. You can invite users through this email system. And so we've got some instrumenting there, but the area that I'm kind of particularly excited about that we're making a bigger focus is how can we deliver Figma files to users through email? And I suspect that'll be a big growth lever for us the remainder of the year.
Awesome. What about for you, Laura?
Yeah, I'd say we use email to sort of hit two main business goals. Transactions, bookings, like how do we sell things to our users? So we're a freemium business, which means that you can have a complete experience on Quizlet, but we are trying to always move you into this more sort of premium, feature-filled experience. And then the other space is around sort of engagement and retention. So how do we get you to come back and have like one more session on Quizlet, do one more study session, get that much closer to your goal? And there are some sort of specific email metrics that map to that. I will say one metric that we spend a lot of time thinking about at Quizlet is deliverability, which is probably like the least sexy part of the email world, but it's like, can we actually get our emails into the inbox? If any of you are students or have students in your families, you know that like students don't really use email the way adults do. They use a lot of like texting, and they use a lot of like WhatsApp and Instagram and Snapchat and like TikTok, and they don't want to spend time in their Gmail. So that is one challenge. And the other challenge is like that a lot of students, because we're an academic tool, will sign up with their school email address, and those oftentimes have like these like very complicated and clunky filtering and spam kind of systems that sit on top of them. So just like getting into the inbox is the first challenge for us, and so that's the metric that we spend a lot of time thinking about. And then after that, it's usually like how effectively are we at driving traffic and or sales, depending on what the goal of the specific campaign is.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So you both mentioned transactional emails kind of part of the mix, and it's maybe not super intuitive that as marketers, you guys care about non-marketing content and that impact. So I'd love, Laura, if you could talk a little bit about why those operational messages matter.
Yeah. We, as a marketer, I think about like all the channels at my disposal, but I will say like our product is our most powerful channel. Like the product experience itself is what gets people to come back and do the thing, right? Yeah. Which is, invite a friend or complete a study session or whatever it's going to be. And so the messages that we send that like key off of that are really important to us. One, I think they it's all part of the same ecosystem. Two, it's how we tell our brand story. So like we don't want to tell like beautiful and engaging stories through marketing emails and then like send you a plain text email that tells you that you forgot your password. Like that's an opportunity for us to like infuse a little bit of like sort of like liveliness and fun and whimsy into an experience that like is not always the most fun. So that's one thing. The second thing is because our product is so, I'd say, powerful, these emails actually have like a huge impact on our traffic. So an example is there's an activity on Quizlet called Match. It's basically like you match terms and definitions to each other and you race against the clock and you race against your friends. And the most opened email that we send out is an email that says you lost your high score. Okay. And this is an email that is like one that, you know, someone put together probably, Quizlet's 14 years old, so probably like 13 years ago, right? And it's probably been touched a few times, but like it keys off of this really foundational sort of emotional thing that students have, which is like, I want to be the best and I want the high score. And so like those kind of emails get sent out, they immediately get opened and they immediately like send someone back to the site. And there's a number of things that we do on the site that have sort of those same interactions. Like your teacher has added a new set to your class. That's like, oh, I need to go study this like right now. Like this is what's going to be on the test tomorrow. So while they're not necessarily as, I think as like marketers, we don't spend as much time thinking about them. They're like at scale, pretty powerful for us.
Absolutely. And you think about the number of those more operational messages that your recipients are getting, those add up, and those touch points over time, if they aren't consistent, start to degrade your brand story that you're trying so hard to build. So.
Yeah, and I mentioned 50 million students when I introduced Quizlet, but we, at that scale, if we can make like a 1% improvement in something, that is like a huge trickle-down effect across everything else we're doing. So like a 1% improvement in deliverability, a 1% improvement in click-through at 20 million emails you're sending out per month. Those are the kind of things that add up to like, oh wow, we're like seeing that stair step that we're always striving for.
Awesome. So kind of on the flip side, talking about transactional messages, I feel like there's somewhat of a perception maybe that kind of one-time, one-to-many emails have had their moment in the sun and it's kind of an outdated strategy. But I'd love to kind of hear, you obviously rely on them. We have a ton of customers who rely on one-to-many campaigns. How do you think about those one-time emails?
Yeah, I would say like we always are like striving to find ways to like scale what we're doing and like operationalize things to like make all this manual work like magically disappear. But there are some things that we just like we can't do like that. And I think anything that has to do with sort of seasonality. So we're a global company. We have students everywhere. So there's like AP exams in the US, but if you are in the UK, the exams that you take there are called the GCSEs. They're kind of like it's like APs meets SATs-ish, I think. And like there's just not a way for us to make that a triggered email. Like we have to be able to know that the APs happen the first week of May and the GCSEs actually happen like a different week. And we want to be able to understand like if we send out an email and there's like, the open rate is really high and the engagement's really strong, we want to know that we can send out another email the next week. And so I think while we're always trying to get more operational and build in things that scale automatically, there is still an opportunity to send out those emails. And to me, what we've really focused on at Quizlet is trying to be much more specific about what we're trying to send and who the segment is. So I think we rarely are like, we're going to send this email to literally everybody around the world, no matter what language they speak, no matter what time of day it is. But it's like, great, we know that this is going to go out to English-speaking people in the US, and this is going to go out to English-speaking people not in the US, and they probably aren't going to be that interested in this specific like cultural touchstone that we're happening here, and that's okay because we know that now and we can sort of tailor the messages that way.
Yeah, I think that's something that you guys do and invest a lot of time in is segmentation, and it's kind of, we talk all about personalization, and I think sometimes we forget that a one-to-one email, yes, very personalized, but you can also send a personalized email at scale where you've been targeted with content, and you've dropped in tags to customize things. So it's definitely still a strong strategy.
It's something that we're working on. One of the things we're thinking about for back to school, and I keep mentioning specific things, but I always think it's more useful to like understand how people are actually applying things, is we want things to feel personalized, but we also know that they need to go out at like a specific time. So one of the things that we're working on like the back end is like, okay, well, if you study chapter 1 in a book on Quizlet, there's probably a good chance you're going to want to study like chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4. And so we can, on the data science side, we can like model that out, and then we can feed those feeds into SendGrid and build what feels like a personalized email, but it actually goes out to literally everybody. They all just get different content recommendations. And those are the kind of things that like may one day become a more sort of triggered email, but we need to validate it first before we set that up. So that's an example of sort of how all those things play together.
Yeah, I love that. So that's a great transition. You guys are both using SendGrid Twilio SendGrid for transactional and these one-to-many sends. But you've also both started exploring the new automation feature. Tony, I'd love to hear from you kind of what are the early use cases that you've been able to solve with SendGrid automation?
Yeah, so right when I joined Figma, we were looking to kind of implement an automation campaign, some sort of marketing automation software. And we were really happy with SendGrid from a transactional standpoint, and that's when I discovered the automation beta, and we got connected. But some of the things that we're doing right now are around onboarding drips, pretty standard, and we're also looking into kind of more interesting use cases. One of the experiments that we're working on actually right now leverages automation, and that's triggering certain emails and drips based on user behavior, similar to what Laura's mentioning around personalization. It's really refreshing to work with a modern API. My last company, we were using automation software that was very old and kind of cumbersome. And throughout this process, it's been great to be able to kind of send feedback. Even one of the engineers that I get to work with, John Smart, has been kind of emailing back and forth and has made some open source pull requests to the SendGrid automation gem, which I think is just a great experience to be kind of working with a developer-centric company on an API that was built recently instead of a decade ago.
Okay, well, we'll appreciate that feedback, and we always like when we're able to disrupt a bit, so that's awesome. Cool, so obviously a ton of work has gone into where you guys are both at with your email programs, and just for folks that are in the room, it would be awesome if you could kind of share one of your hard-earned lessons with all of us. Laura, I'll start with you.
Okay, so I'll take us to like a school metaphor, which is, when your teacher says like you have an A at the beginning of the semester, and then you have to all you have to do is keep your A by like showing up and turning in your homework. But then like once you drop to like a C, it's like really, really hard to like claw your way back to an A in class. We learned that the hard way, I would say, on like the deliverability side. And I will say like nobody at Quizlet, like myself included, had like a super strong email background. So we're like, cool, modern email sending technology, great, let's like send emails to all the people. And quickly we discovered what I just mentioned, which is like students don't like getting email, and like we can't just operate in that way. And so we've spent a lot of time working with the folks at SendGrid, and really getting to know like our user base and like how to interact with them and what works for them, and have like clawed our way back into like being in the good graces of like Gmail and other email providers, to keep our domain reputation high and our IP reputation high. And that's been like a real slog. So on one hand, I think it's like, I love that we are able to just like get started. And on the other hand, I think like hindsight is 20/20. Like I wish we had known like a little bit more about how deliverability works, but now I feel like literally everyone on my team is like, I know how this works, and we're all like staying the course. So.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I think that's something that's really unique about Twilio SendGrid is our team and like the human expertise that we have. So definitely if you're thinking about engaging with Twilio SendGrid on email, take advantage of their expertise. It's not something that you have to go and build for yourself. You get to rely on all of the many, many years of human expertise that group has. What's something that you would share with folks?
Yeah, I think, so I will admit at my last job, I did not love managing email. I think when you think of fun growth hacks, email is not necessarily the first place that you would go. But at Figma, we kind of had an opportunity to come in fresh and build this the right way. And I think what I've learned through this experience is that when executed correctly, email can actually be very sexy, which are words I never thought I'd say. But I think there's no shortcuts to building an email list. You can't push the boundaries on things like reputation. You'll get slapped on the wrist by that very quickly. I think one thing that we've done with great success so far is that we've invested heavily in email design. And I think that's really paid off for us. Our customers actually write in asking to be subscribed to our email list. I've never experienced that in my life. So I think that's showed me that if you really keep a high quality bar and you deliver value to your users, they'll actually look forward to your email, and that's resulted in kind of some of the highest open rates I've ever seen for email. I think the other thing, this is really a testament to our content marketing team. We produce really high quality content through our blog and other channels, and we deliver that to users through email. One of the things that we've done with success is we look to see what's performing well on Twitter, for example, and then we'll package that into a monthly email for users who may not be on Twitter or might have missed it. So I think it's kind of, it's a multi-pronged approach, but I think investment in content, investment, in email design, and then really just making sure you keep that quality bar very high.
Awesome. Yeah. So thinking about, you kind of alluded to having a fresh start when you came to Figma, but in general, for anybody in the room that's either just getting started or looking for a reboot, what would you guys recommend in terms of the first thing that you would do or think about if you were in that position?
Yeah, I definitely think investing in email design is a huge, it's worth doing. Most companies that I see, quite frankly, send very ugly emails. I think putting a little bit of investment in the design, really trying to differentiate yourself and showing your customers that you care about this channel is the first step. There are definitely no shortcuts to building a list. If you're in a situation where you're tempted to blast a list, which I've done myself in the past, I think I've learned that that's definitely not, there are really no shortcuts in kind of building up that reputation. I think the other thing is, one of the things that we're starting to think about more is how to cleverly segment some of this content. With Figma, we really have 5 types of users who use email. And I think we're starting to explore different pathways of really sending a lot more personalized and segmented content, which is very easy to do.
Awesome. How about for you, Laura? What's a getting started thing to focus on?
Yeah, I think one thing that is very easy on Twilio SendGrid.
Yes.
Marketing campaigns is you can literally just start. So before we had sort of the engineering resources to do all the things we wanted to do in terms of feeding all the fields and like syncing up all the unsubscribed data, we just were like uploading contacts and like downloading things when we needed to and doing it manually, and that was fine. The other thing, and using sort of like the WYSIWYG editor and just like making do. One other tip, we talked about this yesterday, that is like blown my mind, is there's a service called Email Monks, where you can send them like a layered like sketch or Photoshop file.
Figma.
What?
Or Figma.
Yeah, or Figma file. Send them your Figma files. And they will like code your responsive email for you in about like, I think it's like 4 hours, as little as 4 hours for like $75. I don't know who does the coding. I don't know where they are. They just send you back an email that says like, the monks have blessed your email. But you can like specify like, I want this responsive and formatted for SendGrid. So it's super great, and it's like freed up. It's really allowed us to create like richer, like more engaging emails because we're not as limited by these like modular elements, and also like freed us from having to work like closely with developers who don't want to work on email coding. So that is like my pro tip for the day. I wish I had like been working with Email Monks for the last decade of my life.
I love that too, because one of the things we're most proud of for marketing campaigns is this editor that we have that allows you to choose your path. You can have a really robust drag and drop WYSIWYG editor with some HTML options, or you can go pure code, and it just is so helpful for people when you have a custom template like that you can import it into the code editor and know that it's going to be pixel perfect and remain untouched. We're not going to break anything. That's something that I think kind of ties really well into that value.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just one more question before we open up for Q&A. So if you do have a question, I'd love if you could kind of head towards one of the mics so we can hear you. But just wanted to kind of hear, looking ahead, what you're each thinking about kind of in the next 6 months that you want to tackle or iterate on. What's on your radar? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm particularly excited about is some of the segmentation of doing transactional email based on user behavior. I think we're starting to scratch the surface of that right now, and I think it's going to be a big growth driver for us over the next 6 months, but I also think it's going to be excellent for things like retention and reactivation. The other thing I'm particularly excited about, Figma is a design tool company. We're the leader in design systems. We see design systems very commonly in things like iPhone design or web application design. But I don't really see it a lot in email. And so internally, we've started to develop an email design system, which I hope to be presenting about next year at Twilio Signal. But it's really, we've seen big lifts from it, even in its infancy. Just last week, I got messaged by an engineer who was working on a different part of the application, who doesn't necessarily have the email experience, but wanted to make sure she was building something that was compliant and fit the brand guidelines. And I was able to just quickly Slack her over this email design system, and she got value out of it even in its infancy. So I think that's something we'll see more companies start to do. And I hope to kind of share publicly some of what we learn over the next 6 months as we continue to develop this.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, especially to be able to scale and empower more of your teammates to quickly get up and running and not try and reinvent the wheel every email. So that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my opportunities and challenges as running marketing at Quizlet is I get to think about all of our channels and how they work together. And we've just finished this big brand strategy project. So Quizlet is very good at this very rational benefit, which is we help you get a better grade on your next test. And we've been spending, historically, that's sort of what we've anchored on, of get better grades faster, those kind of messages. And one of sort of our big outcomes of this project is about us needing to invest and own a little bit more of the emotional side of our brand. It's really hard work being a student. Students are under a ton of stress. And we can be a company that is there with them and supports them along the way. So one of the things I'm excited for with our email program is figuring out how we build more empathy into that. How do we build a stronger relationship with our users through email, even if they don't have a test next week, even if they aren't actually thinking about using Quizlet, but just getting an email from us, getting the message, having us frame our messages in the right way, lets them know that we've got their back, we're there when they need us, and if not, we're still a supporter for them and we're a champion of them and their hard work. So to me, it's about how do we, I feel we have the technical side of our email system mostly set up now. How do we then make it really sing and perform on the brand side for us? So
yeah, it's always amazing to me how emotionally rich almost any category can be. And when you think about, your kids, or going back to yourself when you were in high school and thinking about there's so much pressure and it's only increasing over the years, to be able to give them that recognition and outlet and provide them some content around, managing stress.
Yeah.
There's never not an opportunity to be emotionally resonant. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I would love, are there any questions in the room that we can answer while we've got our experts up here?
Hi, thank you so much for coming and speaking. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you experience when you're trying to segment and identify? You talked about adding more emotion into yours. Can you talk me through kind of how you think about segmenting your customers that way?
Yeah, so we haven't thought about sort of segmenting them on the emotional side of things, but it's making me think a little bit. We tend to segment them a lot on a combination of demographic information and then behavioral information. So a typical segment would be students in the US who aren't paying customers, who have opened an email from us in the last 6 months and haven't used this particular part of our product. But I think the opportunity there for us on the emotional side is more around if that's our segment, how do we position using that feature as something that'll have this sort of, to use what sounds not a cliche phrase, but a micro win. How do you get that sort of emotional win from engaging with us. Because it's really easy for us to fall back on like, use this, get better grades, or like, use this, sleep sooner. But like, use this and like, become the hero in your classroom is like a different kind of message. So I think without really answering your question, that's sort of where I'm trying to move us towards, because I think students are already using Quizlet because they know they're gonna get better grades. Like that's the table stakes. How do we deliver for them on top of that? And how do we make that a differentiator for us?
Awesome. Any other questions before we got one more? Great.
Besides SendGrid, do you use any tools like MailChimp in the past or Sailthrough for the design or sending of those emails?
Yeah, for us personally, we just, I work with our brand team to design emails in Figma, and then we just hand code them. I previously used Litmus for email testing until just recently, Twilio SendGrid rolled out like automated testing platform that is just nice to keep everything under one house.
I have one question here.
Yeah.
So email has traditionally been a very unidirectional media, right? With API, it's becoming a little more automated. But do you do anything with the incoming email? Or who's handling the incoming? Because I work for Dell Scholars program, which is a scholarship program. We've been able to handle the outgoing, but the incoming is still very manual.
Yeah. For us, we're doing some stuff right now with our sales team and our go-to-market team to handle replies. It can be pretty tricky to map incoming messages back to the appropriate rep. I don't have a great answer of how to do that at scale. I think it's something that we're thinking about. We're cautiously optimistic we'll be able to figure it out, but it's also, I wouldn't say a huge priority necessarily right now for our email campaign. I think as tools become more automated and you have sales automation, tools like Outreach, for example, a lot of trust on the consumer side is going down. So we're trying to be very diligent and thoughtful about that. Designers are very quick to get on Twitter and share any displeasure that they have if you don't handle that in the right way.
We do not do that. I don't have a good answer other than we can't do it at our scale. But I think there are ways to be like friendly and more responsive, even if you're not actually responding to the emails. So like figuring out how you build those, like if you're responding to an email and it's like a no reply email, like how do you make that experience feel better? Instead of like no reply and then you get like a bounce back of like this email doesn't exist. Like what does it look like to have a more, to keep repeating the same word, empathetic response to that of like, hey, there's no one here, but like, have you been to our help center or like talk to us on Twitter? Those are like great places to interact with the team.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a best practice that we like to recommend is having that be a real email alias that can, accept inbound replies. We manage it manually, and we make that investment in having, our email team reply, or product marketers, or we have support agents online, because it is so valuable when you get that two-way conversation going. We don't want to miss that opportunity. So definitely something to strive for, and we'll keep thinking about for Twilio, Signal next year to cover. I think that's about all the time we have. I did want to for sure thank you guys for coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us and the questions. And then there's a great talk just coming up at 5:35 where we're going to give you some great examples of really concrete strategies to not only acquiring more email addresses, more contacts to reach out to, but also how to engage them strategically so that they are well nurtured for you. So yeah, thank you very much, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, guys.